Arnold Poker had not always been a cold man. There was a time, not so long ago, if you measured it in heartbeats rather than calendar pages, when he had been the kind of man who laughed too loudly at dinner tables, who danced badly in the kitchen on Sunday mornings, who pressed his nose against the glass of toy store windows even at 42 years old. He had been warm, once. He had been whole. But grief has a particular talent for rearranging a person. 18 months before our story begins, Arnold had stood in a hospital corridor in his $4,000 Italian suit, holding 4 tiny bundles wrapped in pale yellow blankets, listening to a doctor explain in careful, measured tones that his wife, Miriam, who smelled of vanilla and old books and called him Arnie when she wanted something, would not be coming home. A rare complication. An impossible outcome. The kind of thing that only happens to other people, until suddenly, devastatingly, it happens to you. He had brought 4 new lives into the world and lost the one that mattered most in the same hour. The quadruplets, Eli, Eden, Ezra, and Ember had come into existence like a small, beautiful storm, 4 souls arriving together as if they had agreed somewhere in the ether not to face this world alone. They had their mother's eyes, all 4 of them. Dark, deep, slightly amused by everything, even at 2 days old. Arnold had looked at those 8 dark eyes in the first week and felt something crack open inside his chest that he was not prepared to examine. So he did what powerful men with unlimited resources and unprocessed grief often do. He worked. Welcome to Kindness Arena. If you believe in kindness, second chances and unseen connections that change lives, please help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers. Help me show her that stories like this matter and deserve to be heard by hitting the subscribe button, liking the video, comment your thoughts, where you are watching from, and share it with someone who needs it to stay motivated. Your support keeps these powerful true stories alive. He built walls out of meetings, traveled across time zones to outrun the silence of his own home, filled every hour with acquisition deals and quarterly reports and expansion strategies for Poker Global Industries, a conglomerate that touched everything from clean energy, infrastructure to luxury hospitality, with fingers in 37 countries. The company needed him, he told himself. His board needed him. The markets needed him. His 4 children, 8 months old and learning to babble, needed him too. But that was a need he did not know how to answer. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. The morning he left for his business trip, a 6-month odyssey that would take him through Singapore, Dubai, Frankfurt, Sao Paulo, and finally 3 weeks of closed-door negotiations in Seoul, he had stood at the doorway of the nursery in the pre-dawn darkness. 4 cribs, 4 sleeping faces. Eli with his fist curled under his chin. Eden flat on her back like a small empress. Ezra turned sideways in a position that should have been uncomfortable but clearly wasn't, and Ember, the youngest by 4 minutes, made tiny sounds in her sleep that were almost words. He had watched them for exactly 90 seconds. Then he picked up his carry-on bag and walked to the car that was waiting outside. The staff at Poker Mansion on Halcyon Ridge Drive numbered 11 people, a chef, 2 groundskeepers, a housekeeper, a personal assistant who worked remotely, 2 security personnel, a driver, a laundry attendant, and 2 nannies who rotated shifts, and then there was Sheila Mag. Sheila was not easy to categorize, which was part of why people often overlooked her. She had been hired 3 years before Miriam's passing as a general household assistant, a catch-all title that meant she did whatever needed doing. She organized linen closets. She signed for deliveries. She polished silverware on slow Tuesdays. She was 34 years old, originally from a small town in New York, with a broad, generous face, hands that were always slightly work-roughened, and a laugh that arrived without warning and filled whatever room it entered. She had adored Miriam Poker. Not in the complicated, performative way that staff sometimes adore wealthy employers, but in the simple, unguarded way that people adore someone who treats them like a full human being. Miriam had remembered Sheila's mother's name. Had asked about her brother's university applications. Had once stayed up until midnight helping Sheila draft a letter to her landlord because the boiler had been broken for 3 weeks and the landlord wasn't responding. When Miriam died, Sheila had cried in the supply closet for an hour. Then she washed her face, straightened her uniform, and went to check on the babies. It became a habit. In the weeks after Mr. Poker retreated into his grief-shaped armor and then into his work, and then eventually into his private jet, the nannies handled the primary care. They were professional, competent, efficient. But Sheila noticed things. She noticed that Eli cried differently when he was tired versus when he was hungry, a slightly lower pitch for exhaustion, a more urgent rhythm for hunger. She noticed that Eden was soothed by a specific lullaby, not any lullaby, but one particular melody that Miriam used to hum while folding laundry, which Sheila had overheard enough times to reproduce. She noticed that Ezra, the most physically active of the four, needed floor time constantly or he became frustrated and inconsolable, and she noticed that Ember watched everything. She was the observer of the group, eyes tracking every face, every movement, storing information with an intensity that seemed almost impossible for an infant. Sheila started coming in early, then staying late, then spending her lunch breaks in the nursery just sitting on the floor where the babies could see her. She told herself she was just helping. By the time the babies were 10 months old and Mr. Poker had been gone for 2 months, Sheila's role had quietly, organically transformed. The nannies respected her instincts. The chef started consulting her on what the babies were taking in terms of solid foods. The housekeeper deferred to her judgment on nursery schedules. Nobody had appointed her. Nobody had handed her a title. It had simply happened, the way river water finds the lowest path, naturally, inevitably, without announcement. She began doing something else, too. Every morning, she walked each baby through the mansion and narrated the world to them. This is the big painting your mama loved, see how the woman in it is smiling? Your mama said she had a secret and that's why she's smiling. This is the garden where your father used to read on Sunday mornings. These are the tall windows when the sun comes through here at 4 o'clock, the whole room turns golden. Your mama called it the golden hour. She used to stand right here. She said their mother's name often, deliberately, wanting it to live in their ears long before they could understand it. As the months passed and the babies became increasingly mobile, crawling, then pulling themselves upright on furniture, then taking those hilarious, lurching first steps, Sheila transformed the mansion's east wing into what could only be described as a wonderland. With Mr. Poker's standing household budget, which was substantial and largely unsupervised in his absence, she consulted with child development specialists online and made quiet, purposeful changes. Soft play areas appeared along the wide corridor. A reading corner took shape in the sunroom with low shelves filled with board books. She had the gardeners create a safe, enclosed section of the rear garden with grass soft enough for tumbling, and she filled it with sensory textures, different surfaces, wind chimes at baby height, and a small water feature they could splash in under supervision. She painted one wall of the playroom with chalkboard paint and covered it in bright, swirling murals she did herself on a weekend, with a paintbrush in one hand and Ember on her hip. Nobody told her to do any of this. She simply loved them, and love, when it is genuine and unhurried, tends to know exactly what to do. The deal in Seoul closed on a Thursday. It was the largest single acquisition in Poker Global's history, a clean energy infrastructure company that would expand Arnold's reach into 6 new markets and add approximately $2.1 billion to his portfolio over the next decade. His legal team was ecstatic. His board sent congratulatory messages at all hours. His assistant booked a celebratory dinner at the kind of restaurant that requires 3 months' notice and serves food in architectural arrangements on slate tiles. Arnold sat at that dinner, in a private room with 12 people who all wanted things from him, and felt nothing. Not satisfied, not pride, not even the dull, distant echo of ambition that had driven him through the last 6 months like a fuel source. Nothing. He looked at the glass of wine in his hand and thought, unexpectedly and with disorienting clarity, about Ember's habit of making almost word sounds in her sleep. He excused himself at 9:30, went back to his hotel, and told his assistant to change the return flight. Not the original scheduled flight for 2 weeks from now. The flight leaving at 6 the following morning. He did not call ahead. He told no one. He was not sure why. Perhaps some part of him wanted the house as it was, not prepared for his arrival, not polished and arranged and presentational. He wanted to come home to the truth of things. The car from the airport turned onto Halcyon Ridge Drive just after 2 in the afternoon on a Friday in October. The sky was that particular shade of autumn blue that seems almost artificially vivid, the kind of sky that makes everything beneath it look important. The maple trees lining the drive had gone full red and gold, their leaves dropping in slow spirals, and the mansion appeared through them the way it always did, vast, elegant, slightly imposing, its limestone facade warm in the afternoon light. The driver reached for his phone to alert the house staff. "Don't," Arnold said. He dismissed the driver at the gate and walked the last 200 meters himself, rolling his carry-on bag along the stone path, his suit jacket folded over one arm, his tie loosened at the collar. He heard them before he saw them. Laughter. Not the polished, careful laughter of adults trying to perform appropriateness. This was the specific, ungoverned, joyful noise of small children who have forgotten that anyone is watching, a sound that is biologically distinct from all other human sounds because it carries no agenda, no self-consciousness, no performance. It is the purest form of happiness the human body is capable of producing. He stopped walking. He stood in the driveway and listened. 4 distinct voices in the register of toddlers, making the kind of sounds that are between words and pure sound, punctuated by shrieks and thumps and what sounded like splashing. He followed the sound around the side of the mansion to the rear garden. What he saw stopped him completely. The garden had been transformed. Where there had once been a purely aesthetic landscape of manicured hedges and ornamental grasses beautiful but untouchable, a garden that existed to be looked at rather than used, there was now something alive. A section of soft lawn bordered by low, colorful fencing. A water table where two of his children were absolutely drenched, absolutely delighted, absolutely unaware of anything except the extraordinary phenomenon of water moving between containers. A reading nook under the pergola with a striped canopy overhead and a pile of board books on a low table. Wind chimes turning slowly near the wall, making soft music in the October breeze. And there was Sheila. She was sitting cross-legged on the grass in her uniform, or what remained of her uniform's dignity, given that her apron was soaked on one side and there appeared to be chalk dust on her shoulder and something that might have been cured mango on her sleeve, with Ember in her lap, reading aloud from a picture book about a small bear who was afraid of thunderstorms. She was doing the voices. The bear's voice was low and wobbling. The mother bear's voice was warm and steady. Ember was gripping the edge of the book with both hands and staring at the pages with the focused intensity Arnold had noticed in her as an infant, that same expression of someone cataloging the world for future reference. Eli was nearby, constructing something out of large foam blocks with the gravity of a structural engineer facing a genuine deadline. Eden was dancing. There was no music, or rather, there was only the wind chimes, but Eden had apparently decided this was sufficient and was spinning in circles with her arms out, head tipped back, entirely committed to a choreography known only to herself. Ezra had located a patch of mud near the water table and was investigating it with scientific thoroughness, both hands fully submerged. They were beautiful. They were so astonishingly, incomprehensibly beautiful that Arnold Poker, who had not cried since the hospital corridor 18 months ago, who had built an entire fortress of work and motion and distance against exactly this kind of feeling, felt something give way inside him. It gave way the way old structures sometimes do, not violently, but completely. Not with a crack, but with a slow, profound settling. He made a sound. It was involuntary, a sharp intake of breath that was almost a word, almost a name, almost something. Sheila heard it. She looked up from the book. For a moment they simply looked at each other across the garden, the CEO and the maid, the man who had run away and the woman who had stayed, separated by 15 meters of grass and about 1,000 unspoken things. Sheila's expression moved through several emotions in quick succession. Surprise, something like wariness, and then, because she was Sheila, and honesty was simply how she was constructed, a straightforward, undecorated relief. "Mr. Poker," she said. "You're home." Ember, hearing a new voice, turned to look. She stared at Arnold with those enormous dark eyes, her mother's eyes, for 3 full seconds. Then she said, very clearly, for the first time in her life, a word. "Da." Eden stopped spinning. Eli looked up from his blocks. Even Ezra extracted his hands from the mud momentarily to investigate the new presence. Arnold walked across the garden. His expensive shoes were not designed for soft turf, and he didn't care. He crouched down in front of Ember, still in Sheila's lap, and looked at his daughter. "Hey," he said. His voice was rough. "Hey, little one." Ember considered him for another moment with scholarly seriousness. Then she reached out and grabbed 2 of his fingers with her whole fist, the way babies hold onto things, not delicately, not experimentally, but with full commitment, as though she had decided. And that was final. Eden appeared at his elbow. Then Eli, abandoning his blocks. Even Ezra arrived, trailing mud, and pressed one small dirty hand against Arnold's knee. He knelt on the lawn of his own garden in his sole business trip suit and was entirely surrounded by his 4 children, and something in him that had been frozen for a year and a half simply stopped being frozen. He looked up at Sheila. She was watching him with the careful expression of someone who wasn't sure whether she'd done too much or too little, whether she'd overstepped or understepped, whether the next few minutes would undo everything. There was no apology in her expression. She hadn't done anything that required an apology, but there was a kind of open waiting, the look of someone prepared for any outcome and committed to honesty regardless. "How long has this been here?" he asked, meaning the garden. "About 4 months, she said. "I used the household budget. I have all the receipts." "The mural in the playroom?" A small hesitation. "I did that myself. On a weekend. My own time." "The reading corner?" "Yes." "The chalk wall?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Ezra was trying to climb his arm. He let him. "Sheila," he said. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." And so, sitting on the soft lawn in the October afternoon sun while 4 toddlers moved around them like small planets around a recently returned star. Sheila Mag told him everything. She told him about the different cries and what they meant. She told him about Eden's spinning, which had been happening since she first discovered she could stand, a self-soothing mechanism, the child development article suggested, though Sheila suspected it was simply joy made physical. She told him about Eli's building impulse, which was constant and architectural and had already graduated to creating structures that other children's toys were incorporated into whether those toys agreed or not. She told him about Ezra's complete imperviousness to mess, which she delivered in a tone that suggested equal parts admiration and exhaustion. She told him about Ember's words. Da was technically the third. The first had been Ma, said once, quietly, while Sheila was holding her and they were standing near the portrait of Miriam in the hallway, and Sheila had held very still and not said anything because some moments are too large for commentary. Arnold's jaw tightened when she said that. He looked away briefly at the middle distance and looked back. You told them about her, he said. Every day, Sheila said, without apology and without softness and without performance. Just a fact. I told them her name. I showed them her photograph. I told them she had a big laugh and loved old books and that she used to hum while she did things around the house. I told them she picked their names, all 4 of them, from a list she kept in a notebook she carried in her handbag for years before they were born. She paused. I hope that was right. Arnold looked at her for a long time. It was right, he said. His voice barely made it out. The following Monday morning, Arnold did not take a car to his office. His assistant called at 7:30 to confirm his schedule, a full day of catch-up meetings following 6 months away, the kind of schedule that is essentially a wall of obligations from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and he asked her to push everything to the afternoon and clear the morning. He spent the morning in the garden. He was not a naturally playful man. He was aware of this limitation with the self-knowledge of someone who has heard it said about them enough times to accept it as true, but he was also beneath the suits and the acquisitions and the boardroom fluency a man who was capable of learning. Miriam had always said that was his best quality, better than his ambition, better than his intelligence. You actually listen, Arnie. Most people your age have stopped listening. You haven't. So he watched how Sheila moved with them, how she narrated rather than directed, how she created space rather than filled it, how she let Ezra be muddy and Eden spin and Eli engineer and Ember observe. He watched the way she dropped to their level constantly, physically crouched or seated or cross-legged on the floor, so that she was never looming, always present, always in the frame of their world rather than above it. He tried it. He was awkward. Eden ignored him. Eli permitted him to hand over a foam block as a structural contribution but made clear through body language that design decisions were not open for consultation. Ezra grabbed his watch and pulled. Ember, most generously, climbed into his lap and resumed her observation of the garden from this new vantage point with complete equanimity, as though this had always been the arrangement. Sheila watched from a few steps away, not interfering, occasionally biting the inside of her cheek to contain a smile. By the end of the week, Arnold had restructured his schedule. Mornings at home, at least 3 days out of 5. Dinner at home whenever he was in the country. No international travel longer than 3 weeks and a weekly video call with the children even when he was away, which Sheila facilitated with a patience and technical competence that impressed him. He also sat down with the mansion's household manager and restructured Sheila's employment entirely. The conversation took about 4 minutes because it had only one direction. She was given the title of Children's Care Director, created specifically and formally for the first time in the household's history. Her salary was adjusted to reflect, as Arnold put it in the meeting, the actual scope and quality of what she does, which apparently I failed to understand when I was not present to observe it. The household budget for the children's development was formalized and increased. She was given full authority over the children's daily environment, educational planning, and care team oversight. She was given 2 additional support staff answering to her. She was given, for the first time in her working life, a title that told the truth about what she was. She thanked him very simply, with her characteristic directness. I didn't do it for any of that, she said. I know, he said. That's why you deserve it. There is a photograph on the wall of the Poker Mansion's main corridor now, added in the months that followed Arnold's return. It hangs next to the portrait of Miriam, in a frame of similar weight and quality, which Arnold had chosen himself. In the photograph, it is late afternoon in the garden, you can tell by the golden quality of the light that falls through the maples. 4 toddlers in various states of chaos occupy the frame, 1 spinning, 1 building, 1 muddy, 1 observing. A man in an expensive shirt with his sleeves rolled up and his tie completely absent sits on the grass looking simultaneously out of his depth and more present than he has looked in years, and in the center of the frame, slightly blurred because she was laughing when the shot was taken and moved just a fraction, is a woman in a uniform apron with chalk on one shoulder and a book under one arm and her head thrown back with her eyes closed. The laugh had been at something Eli did with a foam block that defied structural expectation. But in the photograph it looks like what it actually was, which was a woman who loved 4 children and had kept every light in a cold house burning for 6 months, laughing because the person who owned the house had finally come home and realized what had been here all along. Miriam Poker, Arnold sometimes thought, would have liked Sheila Mag enormously. He thought she probably knew that too, wherever she was. Watching 4 small faces with her own dark, slightly amused eyes. Knowing, the way she always seemed to know things, that it would all be okay. That someone would stay. That someone did. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness is never wasted and that even a broken path can lead to beautiful places and change of lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Arena because your support keeps stories like this alive and spreading. Tell us in the comment what you would have done differently if you were Arnold Poker. Would you have sacked or promoted her? Or has a stranger's kindness ever changed your life in ways you didn't expect? Would love to hear your story.